Hi, Assalamualaikum. Today we're going to presenting to you about our research title, which is Factors Influencing Currency Exchange Rate in Malaysia. Firstly, let me introduce my group member, which is me, Siti Nur Fawiza, Nur Nadira Shuhaizi, and also Nur Ain Najiha binti Hairun Nasri.
On chapter 1, I will present the claims of a comprehensive study on the currency exchange rate in Malaysia. So the fluctuation of nation currency is influenced by the factors like inflation, GDP, and interest rate. So this interplay of this variable influenced by the monetary policy, economic conditions, and global event that shapes our economic well-being of nation. So let's take a look at the volatility of Malaysia's ringgit currency rates. It's from 2022 until 2002 until 2022. So as shown in figure 1.1, that's us from Bank Negara Malaysia. These visual representations from the stage our exploration into the factors that affecting the fluctuation. So our study are going to the crucial components from the currency exchange rates, inflation, GDP, and the interest rate. So based on the previous research that emphasized the intricate correlation between these variables with monetary policy that holding a significant weight. And additionally, studies underscore the impact of inflation, currency rates, and the nuance of relationship between interest and then the currency value. So fast forward to recent year, Malaysia ringgit faced pressure, depreciation on the major currency like the US dollar. So domestic factors including inflation and rising interest rates contribute to this scenario. So our research aimed to decide this issue, providing insight into the impact of interest rate, inflation rate, and also the GDP on Malaysia's exchange rate. To guide our exploration, we pose essential questions. So basically, what factors influence currency exchange rates? What is the relationship between inflation, GDP, and interest rate with the currency exchange rates in Malaysia? So basically, our objectives are clear. We are going to investigate the factors influencing currency exchange rate in Malaysia and then examine the relationship between inflation, GDP, interest rate with the currency exchange rates. So basically, there are our scope and limitation. We are going to study and cover only 2 decades, which is from 2002 until 2022. So this period encapsulating diverse economic condition, and however, there is limitation exists with focus only on Malaysian study, which will be overlooking a broader global perspective. So our this implication for the study, basically for the research, policymaker may gain a valuable insight that shaping effective monetary and fiscal policy will contributing to economic stability, and the financial institution may benefit from enhanced risk management strategies, ultimately stabilizing the financial system. So before I conclude, let's clarify the key terms in this chapter. So there is four terms we are going to use: currency exchange rate, which impact international trade and money transfer; inflation rate, that rise in economy pricing for product and services; and then gross domestic product, monetary estimate that nation's finished product and services; and the last one is interest rate, that represent the cost of borrowing or the return on investment. So let's conclude for this chapter. In conclusion, the study is a gateway to understand the intricate web of factors that shape Malaysia currency exchange rate, and then based on these variables, which is inflation, GDP, and then interest rate. So this information will make this crucial for the decision maker for connecting our global economy.
Okay, now I will present about literature review, which is in chapter 2, consists of conceptual framework, hypothesis, and summary. On theoretical finding, which is PPP theory, purchasing power parity, indicates the relevance of empirical data and others elements in understanding Malaysian exchange rate and how inflation and deflation affect the ringgit's value. Next is conceptual framework, which is consists DV, which is dependent variable, currency exchange rate, consists 3 IV, independent variable, which is 1, inflation rate, first GDP, and third is interest rate. Hypothesis. The hypothesis of the research project revolves around identifying, understanding the key factors that contribute to Malaysian currency exchange rate. We hypothesize the following independent variables, which is first hypothesis is null hypothesis. There is no relationship between inflation rate and currency exchange rate. For alternative hypothesis, which there is a relationship between inflation rate and currency exchange rate. For hypothesis 2, first in null null hypothesis, there is no relationship between GDP and the currency exchange rate. For alternative hypothesis, there is a relationship between GDP and the currency exchange rate. For the hypothesis 3, null hypothesis, there is no relationship between interest rate and currency exchange rate. For alternative hypothesis, there is a relationship between interest rate and currency exchange rate. Next is summary, which is in conclusion, previous study are used in chapter 2 to relate inflation rate, GDP, and interest rate as independent variables, with Malaysian currency exchange rates, which is utilized as the dependent variable in this research work. Several conclusions have been drawn from prior studies using the data and circumstances used in the previous research. These conclusions were inconsistent with one another, since previous research was derived from a wide range of resources and is being applied to a wide range of circumstances. The explanation offered in Chapter 2 may produce results that are inconsistent.
Now I will continue for the chapter 3, research and methodology. So by immersing ourselves in Malaysia's specific economic context, we aim to shed a light on the complex factors influencing the nation's economic environment during this period. So from the methodological choices for the investigation, we have chosen the path of quantitative analysis, the employee regression analysis, and then basically on the study on exchange rate volatility, we are going to deep into the connection between the exchange rate and independent variables. So our dataset is carefully from reliable sources such as central bank reports and the National Economic Database to ensure the certainty of our analysis. So for the statement and hypothesis, we have crafted a hypothesis around inflation, GDP, and interest rate, seeking to validate this relationship empirically. So the purpose of this research is designed to provide valuable insight into the dynamic nature of national currency exchange rate. By looking the relationship between dependent variable with the independent variable will be offer a meaningful insight which for the policymaker, businesses, and investor. So the use of quantitative research and statistically tools such as regression analysis guides our research journey to a deeper understanding of this complexity. Next, for the research strategy, so basically we are going to use a difference in a different study, which highlight the adaptability of models and analytical method for answering our questions about economic research in diverse setting. So from the data and sources, based on the macroeconomic variable like GDP, interest rate, and inflation rates, our data sources from reliable places such as the World Bank and Bank Negara Malaysia to ensure our solid foundation for our analysis. So this type of research, we also chosen the type series analysis approach, which extend from 2002 until 2022. And then the diagnostic check for time series analysis, there are three things, which is the variance inflation factor VIF, therapy Watson test, and normality test. This is an acts as our guardian to ensure the reliability of our model. And then there is interpretation of the result will guarantee the accuracy of our finding. There are also three types of analysis: descriptive analysis, correlation analysis, and the last one is multiple regression. So this kind of analysis to provide a comprehensive view of various correlations within our economic data. And the last one, for the conclusion, for these chapters, we are going to detail our analytical approach through regression analysis, diagnostic check, and then also for the various of statistical tools. So basically, we aim to provide a reliable, insightful analysis of the economic that impact the Malaysian currency market. So basically, from this research, we are going to deep our understanding for the economy forces. So, like I mentioned, this analytical approach that emphasize the data, the reliable data.
Now, let's take a look at the chapter 4, which is result and discussion of the research. This chapter introduces the research hypothesis and present the main finding of the study. It also examines the relationship between independent factors such as inflation rate, GDP, and interest rate, and also the dependent variable itself, which is currency exchange rate. Our study used many statistical methods and techniques such as descriptive analysis, correlation analysis, regression analysis, Durbin-Watson analysis, normality test, and also multi-collinearity test. First, let's take a look at the descriptive analysis. The table represents the data from one dependent variable and three independent variables. This data also is within the range of 2002 until 2022. Based on the figure, it shows the finding and summarize the data that has been collected on the study of the currency exchange rate in Malaysia. In this test, we analyze the mean, median, maximum value, minimum value, standard deviation, skewness, kurtosis, and probability for each variable, either dependent variable, which is currency exchange rate, or independent variable, which is inflation rate, GDP, and interest rate. Moving on to the correlation analysis, this analysis offers explanation for the connection between various variables, which is dependent and independent, uncovering the scale and nature of their correlation. From the result of correlation, we can interpret that correlation coefficient between currency exchange rate and inflation rate are 0.825030, which indicate a strong correlation. Other than that, the correlation coefficient between currency exchange rate and GDP are 0.833255, which also signify a strong positive correlation. And lastly, the correlation coefficient between currency exchange rate and interest rate are 0.470963, which indicates a positive but weak correlation. Next analysis is a multicollinearity test, which we done through a VIF, which is variance inflation factor. From the result, we can see that the center VIF value, which are less than 5, which indicates there is no multicollinearity among the variable, which allow the independent variables, which is inflation rate, GDP, and interest rate, to explain the dependent variable, which is currency exchange rate, in their own terms. The fourth test is serial correlation test, which is we done through the Durbin-Watson analysis. As you can see, Durbin-Watson score are lower than Durbin low value in the first order test. So we do the second order test using the Birch-Godfrey LM test, which show that our chi-square value is less than 0.05. This means that we have the evidence to reject our null hypothesis that mentioned there is no relationship between the DV currency exchange rate and the IVs, which is inflation rate, GDP, and interest rate. Moving on to the regression analysis, from the result we can conclude that none of the variables in our model demonstrate statistically significant correlation with the currency exchange rate. The R-squared value is 0.080935, which means that the low R-squared value indicates that the model only accounts for the small portion of fluctuation in our DV, which is currency exchange rate. For the last test, which is normality test. This test result is shown in the histogram for a dataset with 21 observations totaling from 2000 to 2022. As we can see, the mean residual is close to zero, indicating unbiased forecast on average. More than half of the residuals are positive, as indicated by the mean value of 0.04 to 0.068. So, in conclusion, the comprehensive analysis that we had conducted revealed a valuable insight or information into the factors that influence the currency exchange rate. The result shows various degree of correlation and variables, which is IV and DV, are not excessively correlated. We can also conclude from regression analysis that the model that we used in our study was limited.
I will present about chapter 5, which is consists conclusion and recommendation. And first is with introduction. This chapter used multiple linear regression to study inflation, GDP, and interest rate on the mentioned currency exchange rates. Like early research, it shows a strong negative link between Malaysian inflation and the ringgit. I will present about conclusion of finding, which is first is investigating factors contributing to currency exchange rate, which is the research aimed to identify the intricate factors that influence Malaysian exchange rate, which is consists three: inflation rate, GDP, and interest rate. Although the analysis used robust methods and rigorous statistical tests, this final result provide a more nuanced picture than initially expected. Despite the low VIF score, which do not indicate significant multicollinearity problem, the selected variables show surprisingly weak correlation coefficient with the independent variable exchange rate. For next is examining the relationship of currency exchange rate and inflation rate. The inflation rate coefficient consists 0.123795 show a positive, although statistically insignificant, relationship with exchange rates. For next is inquiring the relationship between currency exchange rates and gross domestic product. In the studies model, the GDP coefficient consists 0.000444 was statistically insignificant and at a very low level, providing little explanation for the fluctuation in exchange rate. And next, which is a 4 point, which is investigating the relationship between currency exchange rate and interest rate. The coefficient on interest rate consists 0.033865 was also shown to be statistical insignificant, suggesting an unclear relationship with exchange rate in the current model. This finding contradicts established economic theory that change in interest rate affect capital flow and the exchange rate. Of research study, which is first is significant to central bank as a policymaker. Our study offers useful insight for central bank of Malaysia by exploring the connection among interest rate, inflation rate, GDP, and the currency exchange rate. It provides them with practical tools to deal with the complexity of monetary policy and make informed decisions on financial stability and economic growth. Next is significant to Ministry of Finance as a government body. For the Ministry of Finance, dealing with the link between interest rate, inflation rate, GDP, and the ever-changing value of currency exchange rate Malaysian ringgit remain as a constant challenge. Our study, recent research, provide a guide for the ministry to navigate the complex situation and guide ministry to stable economic conditions and long-term growth. And next is significant to bank as a financial institution. In the case of Malaysian bank and financial institution, effective management of foreign exchange rates, accurate pricing of financial instruments, and the creation of a good hedging strategy for clients require a clear understanding of what causes exchange rate to change. Is limitation of study, which is our mentioned currency exchange rate research, highlight key factors, but it acknowledges limitations like the narrow time frame, reliance on specific data source, and exclusion of certain variables, suggesting future research to deepen understanding and refine conclusion for a more comprehensive analysis of the currency markets, dynamics, and economics. This recommendation for the future, which is first is include qualitative factors, while the focus on the study was on quantitative economy indicators. It will be beneficial for future research to incorporate qualitative aspects such as political stability, market sentiment, and investor confidence. Second is dynamic policy effect, which is research into dynamic effect that policy intervention, both monetary and fiscal, have on the rates at which currency are exchanged. It is possible for policymakers to be assisted in the formulation of more effective strategy for maintaining stability and supporting economic growth. For third is comparison across nation, which is to evaluate the response of Malaysian exchange rate in relation to those of other economies. For fourth is continuous monitoring and updating, which is in considering the fact that the state of the economy is in a constant state of change. It is imperative that the finding of the research be continually monitored and updated on a regular basis. In summary, our research examined the complex relationship between currency exchange rate, inflation, GDP, and interest rate in Malaysia, finding unexpected results that highlight the need for a nuanced understanding of the local context, particularly the positive correlation between interest rate and exchange rate. Okay, that's all from us. Thank you.